Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The spa and spa life, the SPA, is seek power always. You have that power within you to do whatever you want in the world. Now, I am so thrilled to introduce our guest that we have today. She is a psychologist, an author, a speaker. Dr. Valerie Baker, she pioneered healing Patriarchy Stress Disorder. That'll be known as PSD. It's the trauma of thousands of years of oppression imprinted on women's DNA. She calls PSD the invisible inner prison that keeps women from experiencing their ultimate success and happiness. Wow, we got a lot to talk about, sister.
Yes, we do, sister. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's so great to have you here. So, you've had over 20,000 hours of work as a therapist and a coach to successful women, and you've guided them through what you call jailbreaking PSD. How did you get into this work?
My own imprisonment that I was blind to and unaware of. I was just on track to be successful, checking off the boxes, doing everything I thought I was supposed to do. I went to school, got all my degrees, got my master's degree from Columbia, got my PhD, was having a successful career working for a university, married a great guy, got a house in the suburbs, had a daughter. And it wasn't until I hit, and a lot of women I work with, it's not until we hit a crisis that we stop and actually look at our lives and ask ourselves that honest question, am I truly happy and fulfilled? And for me, it was a health crisis where I hadn't even realized the high level of stress I had been running until one day I ended up in an ER with a suspected stroke, which thankfully turned out to be just stress. And putting this in air quotes, of course, stress can kill too. And for me, the great awakening was that after checking myself out of the ER, what did I do? I went back to work. I went to see my evening clients because I had only canceled the afternoon ones. And so the next day I woke up, I was aware enough to know that it ain't right. Something is just not adding up here. And I started deconstructing my quote unquote perfect life, looking for where I had been using work to hide that deeper pain of not being truly happy and fulfilled. And I discovered that over the years, I had become so disconnected from my true authentic essence, from my true authentic desire, from my pleasure. So I was on the surface, the facade was so perfect. I was living the life. I had it all, but deep down inside, I was a dead woman walking. And that's what led me, once I realized that led me to look at, well, how come my clients were having these big breakthroughs, but I was not? What was I doing for them that I was not doing for me? And it turned out that, because I've specialized in healing trauma all my career, and I just never thought that I had trauma. And when the dots began to connect, I just received this, divine download, however this information came about patriarchy stress disorder, beginning to recognize that we were born with the genetic memory of never having a voice, never being able to live the life from our desire, from our pleasure, from our power, which I know this is something that you teach women to step into. It's never been safe to live this life, and we have never had role models of living this life. And so once I started seeing this as traumatic, because hey, from my view, oppression is traumatic, and now we have scientific evidence that it changes our DNA. So we're born with this set, and no matter how much mindset work we do, our subconscious still knows it's not safe to be truly embodied, empowered, living from our desire. And once I started healing that as trauma, my life began to change dramatically. And so I'm very happy to report my own jailbreak journey, and now walking my clients and students through a 5-step jailbreak system.
Right. Wow. I mean, this is such important work because, so many, women are then in your position where they're checking the box. It's like this, and this should equal happiness and this should be
Yes.
okay. And it's all the shoulds that come around that. And with knowing that there is, a DNA, woven in there so what are some of the ways that the PSD manifests then?
Hmm. Oh, that's a great question, Diane. The woman that I work with, she's more likely to notice that she's not even likely to notice that she's stressed. So something that trauma conditions us to be, it conditions us to be in this high level of nervous system activation always, because trauma teaches us to stay safe. And these are the survival instructions that we received in our DNA, plus our own personal traumas. To get traumatized, you don't need to have been held at a gunpoint. Any, unwanted sexual attention, a glare, or feeling unsafe. As a woman, there are so many ways for us to feel unsafe in the world. So this all creates a layered cake of trauma. Then that creates a high level of stress always. So what we're likely to notice is that we have trouble sleeping through the night. We have trouble just sitting down and relaxing without a glass or two of wine, or constantly checking the phone, constantly distracting ourselves, because there is something deep down inside that's always churning, some anxiety, some activation, the thoughts are swirling, and most likely we just think it's normal because that's just how it's always been.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to be tortured inside. It's our birthright to have a restful night of sleep, to be recharged, refreshed, and actually to experience life of pleasure. Another area where PSD manifests is in this kind of dullness. I often hear from women, like, I feel like my life is passing me by, like I'm there, like I'm living it, but I don't feel fully alive. And it often manifests in relationships where a woman is either, a lot of successful women are single because deep down inside they feel, well, because we're living in patriarchy, it's very challenging to find a partner who will be comfortable with her power. So she feels, for me to be fully in my power, it's easier to be single, but then deep down inside there is still this longing. Or if a woman is in a relationship, there are so many ways in which she sacrifices of her own desires, she compromises, she doesn't fully live into her power because that conditioning that it's not safe. So relationships become a strange challenge. There's not that passion, there's not that juiciness. And again, we think that it's normal because the bar is set so low for relationships in this patriarchal society. Basically, if in a heterosexual relationship, if a man has a pulse and he comes home and occasionally brings bacon, totally passes for a good relationship. But we deserve so much better. We deserve to be adored as the goddesses that we are. We deserve men who celebrate our power. And men want to do that, believe it or not. They want to. They just need a woman to take the lead. And for that, a woman needs to be comfortable with her own power. And for us to be truly comfortable with our own power, it needs to feel safe. And for that, we need to deal with trauma that manifests on the mind, body, spirit level. So when I work with trauma, I bring together psychology, biology, and spirituality for this deep embodied feeling of safety. And then I see great transformations in both work or career. A woman finds that it's safe for her to be in her full worth, receive the abundance financially, relationally, the pleasure abundance.
Right.
And everything transforms in her life inside and out.
Right. Well, this is such an important, conversation. I mean, most people, at least on the show, have heard before that, I was a San Diego police officer. So I worked, in the field as well as undercover. So I got to see how people felt safe or not safe in the world. Right. And it's such a through line that, walking down the street is very different for a woman than it is for a man, in terms of the reaction of the space and their environment. And there's things that you can do to really fortify your power and how it is that you show up in the world and have that happen. And I know part of that, especially when I talk about spa life, is about like designing your life versus living by default and just letting things happen. And I think part of what you were talking about in terms of like checking the box and all these things, it can almost be a form of default, right? You're just doing all the right things, right? But what does that all add up to? And how is it that you're designing your life so that you're not walking around the world so fearful, and that you're actually truly standing in your power versus kind of a fake sense of power? So what are some of the, what are some practical things that women could do maybe on a daily basis that can help them regain that power, and how they can design their life better?
Yeah, that's such an insightful question, and I can appreciate what you've seen and experienced as a police officer. You have this level of awareness of how people own or don't own their power. So this is my perspective from the trauma healing, through the trauma healing lens. Default is safe. Default is safe. And our biology is set up in the way that safety comes first because our survival comes first. And women I work with, they are high achieving. They think all the right thoughts, the mindset wise. They say all the right things. And so it may be a little even, confusing. Like, what do you mean I'm not fully in my power? And what are some practical things we can do to fully embody it? Well, I'll give you an example. Check in with yourself in that quiet moment when, you're not answering the phone, there are no demands on your time. First of all, see how challenging it might be to carve out 5 minutes for yourself, just for yourself. And check in with the level of comfort or discomfort that you're feeling when it's just you and you. And that's a big part of your power. Do you have the power to fully be in this moment, fully experience the moment through your senses? When you're having sex, are you fully in your body? Are you fully turned on? Is every area of your body online? Or are there some areas that go dark? And it's not your fault. So everything that I'm saying, none of it is our fault, because that ancient trauma plus whatever we experience on a daily basis, walking down the street or being bombarded by social media and media that polices our bodies, that polices our thoughts, our expressions, and we start doing it ourselves, right? So it's not our fault. But the first step of stepping into our power begins with awareness of where we're not fully there. When you're having a meal, are you present with your food? Senses of smell, taste, everything. Is it all online? And when you are, let's say, if your work involves working with people, being in the public eye, speaking up in meetings, etc., do you feel that you are fully there, or do you retract your power to make some people more comfortable? Right? Do you hide your light a little bit? Are you tentative in your verbal expression? If you're working for yourself, how comfortable are you making a sale? Right? Asking for a sale, setting your prices. How much do you feel you are fully entitled to, be valued at the highest level of what you're creating in the world? These are all questions that may seem maybe a little uncomfortable. And then once you notice that there is some discomfort, then you have something to work with. Then it's looking at this gap. And again, acknowledging it's not your fault, and then gradually inviting yourself to spend a little more time in that gap. When I work with my students and clients, I give them concrete practices for the mind, body, and spirit to create that safety. So I'm going to share the simplest practice, the 101, with you if you think that might be useful.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So simple. when you notice yourself on the edge of that gap, you're a little bit uncomfortable, whatever the situation is, just feel your feet on the floor. Feel your feet on the floor. Touch something in your environment. Look around and take in the environment through your eyes, through the senses of smell, if taste is available to you. Right. And yeah. And you know what this does? It sends a signal to our lizard brain that is the ancient biological safety programming is there. It sends a signal that we're physically safe. And that shifts us also from the swirling mind, figuring out, oh, do I do this? Drops us into the body where we can get in touch with our intuition. That is one of the sources of power that patriarchy kind of took away from us, devaluing it, getting us out of touch with the body, making sure that we operate from here up. So it may seem very simple, but I encourage you to take it out for a spin, and also notice the inner resistance there may be for doing that. Or once you experience, oh yeah, I could get into my body, notice that it may be hard to do it again, because there are all these inner defenses, the invisible prison that keeps us from attempts of jailbreak. It's fascinating how it is, right? Because we know what we need to be doing. We know about self-care. We know all the right things. We know how to eat right, how to exercise. We know to take time for ourselves. But do we consistently do it? And it's not our fault if we don't. It's that conditioning, it's that trauma, that it's safer living in default. It's safer living in the status quo.
Right. Well, it's so important to, awareness is such a big conversation that we have around, because so many things happen on automatic and by habit. And it's only when you step out. And how many women, I'm sure you're seeing this all the time, that they're not in their body, right? They are just kind of floating through the day, or they're in their head, and they have so much happening. And so I love the whole physical presencing of yourself in your space, because then that helps you drop into that intuition that allows you to just finally get a real grasp of where you're at. I think one of a perfect example is when you're driving and you get somewhere and you're like, you don't even know how you got there. Right? Yeah. You just kind of check out in the moments of those things happening. And I think just kind of piggyback on that is that whole sense of busyness, right? Mm-hmm. We all have 24 hours, and there's just, I look at it as the new addiction is the busyness that people are having in their life. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you are not having busyness run you. And I love how you talk about like how good can it get and utilizing pleasure. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this is something that I've, it's so juicy for me to talk about this. And again, just circling back to where I was and where I see women, powerful women are. Like, I was at this conference where very accomplished women spoke from stage, said all the right things, powerful message. But I looked at their physical presence, and their postures were apologetic. They were apologetic for taking up space in the world. And I was just wondering, like, how much juiciness and pleasure they're running in their own lives. And that's where it started for me, becoming aware that I was addicted to stress, that I was using my busyness to hide that deeper pain of not being truly happy, because there was so much despair there, Diane. I've checked all the freaking boxes. Right. I've done it all.
Like, what more can I do?
What more can I do? So of course I put layers of protection over it. You know, I would drink a little, I would overeat a little, I would Netflix binge a little too much, and overwork. So once I started to, first of all, awareness, right? Recognize that, acknowledge that there are walls of this invisible prison. And then it's actually the first step of my system. And the second step is looking at the defenders, the prison guards that are there. Stress addiction being one of them. And they're only there because they're protecting our safety. They're not bad guys. but it's safer in the prison. So once I started creating counteraction, I started using the strategy that created that safety within me, in my body. It's safe to be in my body. Pleasure practices were huge for that, reawakening my pleasure through the senses and seeing how far I can push the bar of how good can it get. And it's interesting, like it can start with so simple as like upgrading the glass you're using, like to drink your water, to something that gives you more pleasure. And noticing, like surveying your environment to notice, like, well, is this giving me maximum pleasure? Can I upgrade that? So it starts with that and enhancing the inner capacity to receive that pleasure, because there are a lot of defenses around that. There's pleasure police, because patriarchy, there's nothing more dangerous to the patriarchal status quo than a woman who's in touch with her pleasure and her desire. Right. Nothing more dangerous. And in her power, come on. So there are very powerful defenses around that. So when we work on creating that inner safety, awakening pleasure receptors, training them, because it is training. They have been atrophied over thousands of years, where our lives have been about anything but pleasure and power. And then the game of how good can it get translates into all these areas. All of a sudden, I'm looking at my business, and I'm like, is this in my pleasure? Like the way I'm running this, I'm doing this. Now let me scrap this concept and let me do something else. Is this in my pleasure? Yes. This is the client I enjoy working with. This is how I enjoy working. And then boom, the results are so much better for everyone, right? Or in my relationship, how can we raise the bar of having an amazing relationship from where it is, like on the floor in our society, to like raising it up? And there are no role models. That's something that we need to be aware of. If we look around, we're like, oh, everybody else has it worse. No, but check in with yourself and invite yourself to play this game. How good can it get? And I'm here if you need any tips and guidance. This is my jam.
I love it so much. We're so in sync with this because, you have to claim your power, right? It's not someone's going to give that to you. And when you feel that things are off, and this deservability around that as well, especially, I think it's almost harder for women when things are going well, because then they don't want to like rock the boat, and they kind of feel like, I'm better off than most people. So who am I to want this much more or have this other thing going on, right? Because you're not doing well in things, then it's like, oh, you can only go up from there. But I almost feel like the plateaus that happen for people, that they don't see those as launching pads to get to the next level of what it is that they want to do, because they deserve that, right?
Absolutely.
We all deserve to have that expression that we want to have in the world, and what the reflection of that is. And speaking of pleasure, one of the things I always love to ask my guests is, our rooms are created to have different experiences for us. How we are in our bedroom versus our kitchen and our office are all very different experiences. Yeah. So what is your favorite room? And I know you've recently moved, so I don't know if you've established that yet, but what is your favorite room and why?
It's so hard to choose. I love the kitchen, and it's open concept, so it flows into the dining room. And I love, my partner and I cook together, and we'll like dance, and we're like, we're like an hour turn on, and we'll play with food, and there's music, and there is fun, and we flow into having dinner with the kids. So it's fun. And I also love to be outdoors by the pool. I brought 2 hammocks from Brazil because they remind me of a whole different level of pleasure that has not been accessible to people in the northern hemisphere. So these are my favorite places. And being in the great outdoors, I know it's not a room technically, but even now I'm in my office, I'm at a stand-up desk, and I'm looking at the mountains. I have like just a perfect view that I feel supports me, supports my energy.
Oh, I love it so much. I love that you're embodying your work, about how you're showing up with that pleasure, and you're looking at the things that elevate you and have you have a deeper expression. So I appreciate that. And I know that our listeners are going to want to hear more about, about the PSD and, how they can learn more about that and how they can stay in contact with you.
Great. psdandme.com. psdandme.com. That's where you can learn. It will take you to a free audio training that I recorded about it. I'm working on a book, so soon at that same URL, you'll have a sample chapter for your pleasure. And this is a great way to dip your toes into this work, learn about how you've been affected by PSD. Because like you said, Diane, when the woman who is ready for this work is a woman who's checked all the boxes. She's tried this all. She's been in this hamster wheel of achievement and also in the hamster wheel of self-improvement and personal development for years. And she is so... there's so much pain. This is something that I'm just speaking directly to your listener right now. This is how you know that you're ready for this work. You have this, on the outside, your life looks perfect. And on the inside, you have this deep secret. Maybe you're keeping it from yourself too, that you're not 100% happy and fulfilled. And you keep telling yourself stories that others have it worse and you should be grateful. And you feel guilty about feeling this way and you don't talk to anyone about it unless like a couple of glasses in with your best girlfriend, right? And she has the same secret. And guess what? I had the same secret for years. And everyone I work with has the same secret. So a part of what I'm creating with the book now, writing the book with a working title, Jailbreakers, about PSD as the missing piece to women's ultimate success and happiness. A part of the bigger vision is creating a movement of jailbreakers. So I'm creating a sisterhood of jailbreakers. I'm teaching my 5-step system. So PSD and me is a great way to get your toes dipped into this work. And if it speaks to you, if you want to understand deeper, try it on for size, how exactly you can create your own jailbreak right now in whatever area of your life. You can jailbreak your relationship, your career, your business, your finances. Email me, Valerie at drvalerie.com, Valerie at drvalerie.com, and put PSD in the subject line, and we'll have a chat. But only if you've recognized yourself in that hamster wheel analogy. You've done it all. You've checked all the boxes. There's nothing else to check, my dear. And none of what's going on, all these failures in personal growth or whatever, plateaus, none of it is your fault.
Right. Oh, well, thank you so much. We'll have all the links in the show notes for people who are driving and didn't get a chance to jot that all down. So we will have that there. So I just want to thank you for your time here today and all your information and your insights and sharing your own path. I think it's so powerful, particularly for women entrepreneurs, to see that, it maybe isn't a perfect path, right? And that's part of the, I talk about the facade, right? The things that are happening behind the scenes that we don't want to share because we think we're the only one experiencing that. So I think this is such a valuable, important conversation to be having around that. So thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, thank you, Diane. Such a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you. So listeners, we're talking about awareness, both, my first step and Dr. Valerie's is about having awareness. You got to see where you're at in order to go to where you're headed off to. So one of the other resources that you have is you can do the liferesetquiz.com. And that will also be in the show notes where you can see where are you at in your life, knowing these awarenesses about what supports you and what doesn't. And please, if you're having any thoughts or having this internal dialogue, reach out and tag both myself and Dr. Valerie. Will answer any of your questions that you have. We want to make sure that you get support in whatever you need in the world. You can also send private messages to us as well, because I know some of this, you may not be ready to have a public conversation around that, and we get that too. So whichever way it is, we just want to make sure that you guys get that support and that help. And, whatever's happening in your life right now, it's here to perfectly serve you. And there are ways to get out of it and to move through to the next level. So I just want to thank you guys all for sharing your precious time with us. And as always, live your spa life. Bye for now.